Hi, this is Neil's on Dynasty. This video is going to be about probably 15 minutes or so, because it's not really going to be me talking. This other guy did a better job of explaining what's going to be happening or why Egypt is threatening war with Ethiopia by this November, actually. Oddly enough, another weird thing to happen at this time in history. Buy some silver and some platinum. Like, share, and subscribe. Be kind, helpful, and grateful. Here's the story. It's got some cool maps. I'm going to skip through a little bit. I want you guys to see the maps so you get an understanding of how important the Nile truly is to Egypt and how stupid they are for taking advantage of it and not trying other things in the 100 or so years they've been there to developing and whatever. Yeah, here it is.
This is Egypt. It's a huge country in northern Africa, bordering Libya, Sudan, and Israel right here. But this is also Egypt, with only the populated areas highlighted on the map. As you can see, most of Egypt's territory is uninhabited. Let me show you another one. Satellite image of Egypt. This one. In fact, 96% of its territory is...
He said 96% of its territory is desert, and the only area truly that isn't desert is actually the Nile, and a little bit off the Nile and the tributary from the Nile. Now we're going to jump forward to the hypocrisy, actually, of Egypt, because Egypt has dams on the Nile.
Now Egypt has a population of 105 million people, and it puts a huge strain on the Nile. More water is used to drink, to take a shower, much more lands are irrigated with the nice water, to grow more foods, more cities are lit with the power generated by the hydroelectric power plants.
Hydroelectric power plants.
So that's exactly why this narrow strip of land is called Egypt's lifeline. And now, after thousands of years, this lifeline might be cut by another country, Ethiopia.
It has the potential to give millions of people electricity, to transform the country. Downstream, Egypt is furious and worried.
The Nile is the longest river in the world, and it runs through many countries. Its two main tributaries are the White Nile and the Blue Nile. The White Nile, which starts from the Great Lakes region of Central Africa, flows north until it reaches Khartoum, Sudan's capital, where it converges with the Blue Nile. The Blue Nile itself originates in Ethiopia.
Okay, see, now here's the problem that Egypt has. The Blue Nile consists of about 85% of the water that goes into the Nile, and these people think they own this in this country. And they're not willing to make any concessions, and never have. And the people in this country here are suffering like sons of bitches because of the arrogance of those people there.
Lake Tana, and provides more than 85% of the water that flows into the Nile River. Ethiopia, which hosts the source of the Blue Nile, is about to complete the construction of Africa's largest and the world's 7th largest hydroelectric dam on the Blue Nile, roughly 20 kilometers away from the border with Sudan.
Now this is interesting because, I can't go up. They're actually in Sudan, southern Sudan, they're fighting a little small civil tribal war right here. And up in this area of Ethiopia, there is also a long-going tribal warfare of the tribe that actually controls, or used to control, the government and no longer controls the government. So there's conflict going up here in Ethiopia and a conflict going right here in Sudan, and Egypt wants to blow that dam up.
Once completed, the dam will generate 6,500 megawatts of energy, and its reservoir will be able to hold 74 billion cubic meters of water in it, a close number to the Nile River's average annual flow of 84 billion cubic meters. It's a huge project not only for Ethiopia, but for the entire African continent.
And by the way, China funded it. And China also funded Egypt's building projects and dam. So China is going to lose no matter what. But they already forgave the debts of both countries because China's a good country like that. No, they had to for their economic reasons. It was cheaper for them to forgive the debt than collect it and cause these other countries to go bankrupt. But anyhow, I did another story on that. You can watch it if you want. Let's continue with this story.
Its main function is to produce electricity. Ethiopia has a population of 150 million people, and 68% of its population lives without electricity.
68% of the Ethiopian population lives without electricity, and this dam will help provide electricity for them. And Egypt's saying that these people do not deserve to create electricity off of water on their country's land to benefit them. And Egypt says that he's going to kill these people and blow these people up and cause these people to have horrible lives for the rest of eternity so that Egypt can keep stealing their water.
Once finished, the dam will provide electricity to over 78 million Ethiopians.
78 million of the 150 million, about half the nation, will be able to get power from this dam. And Egypt's telling them, no, we're going to go to war with you. You can't do that.
Currently, they are using waste and biomass as the main source of energy.
Egypt says, you just keep using waste and biomass for your energy, you pathetic Africans.
Also, only 24% of primary schools and 30% of health clinics have access to electricity. Due to the lack of energy, Ethiopia hasn't been able to industrialize and heavily depended on agriculture to keep its economy functioning. But the good news is that Ethiopians haven't given up. They are trying hard to create a bright future for their country. That's why they are building Africa's largest hydroelectric dam. They expect the dam to transform almost every field in the country, and thus named it the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. It will provide households with clean and affordable energy. The electricity will help them industrialize Ethiopia and improve agriculture. It may also transform education and bring the internet to rural areas. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam will not only provide Ethiopia's people with electricity, it will make Ethiopia Africa's largest power exporter as well. Ethiopia will be able to make hundreds of millions of dollars by selling surplus energy to the neighboring countries. Because of these estimated benefits, the dam has become a symbol of national pride in Ethiopia, and Ethiopians are really obsessed with it. But on the other hand, in the two
Here's the trifecta. I did 3 videos on.
People are not very excited about Ethiopia's megadam project. It's long been a source of tension between Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia, especially between Egypt and Ethiopia. Egypt considers this project as an existential threat and a matter of national security. It says the dam poses a serious threat to Egypt's Nile water flow, on which it almost entirely depends to meet its freshwater needs. According to the Egyptian government, the new dam will decrease the annual flooding, which is one of the most important natural events as it enriches Egypt's farmlands with sediments that are vital for growing food in the region. Their other concern is for their own Renaissance dam, the Aswan High Dam, which was built in the 1960s. It revolutionized almost every field in Egypt, the same way Ethiopians expect their own dam will do once completed. Moreover, thanks to the Aswan High Dam, they are able to store the floodwater in its huge reservoir and use it during droughts. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam might result in significantly less water in Egypt's Aswan High Dam, and therefore lead to serious food and electricity shortages in the country. Less water in the Nile will also disrupt transportation along the Nile in Egypt. And yet the Nile is still an important transport route for them. However, Egypt's main concern is about the process through which Ethiopia fills its dam. The dam's water volume is enormous, and filling it might cause serious interruptions to Egypt's water supplies from the Nile and empty the Aswan High Dam, which would have devastating results for Egypt. That's probably the reason Egyptians see Ethiopia's dam as an existential threat. Ethiopia started the construction of its mega dam in 2011 during the peak of the Arab Spring, when former president of Egypt Hosni Mubarak had to step down as a result of mass protests, and the country was consumed by internal instability. This transitional period took 2 years, and later Egypt accused Ethiopia of taking an advantage of Egypt's internal turmoil to start the construction of its mega dam, and Egypt has long tried to sabotage the dam's construction by different means. Since the early 1900s, Egypt has established almost total control of the Nile River. In 1929, Egypt and Great Britain signed an agreement. It allocated 48 billion cubic meters of the Nile's average annual flow of 84 billion cubic meters to Egypt and 4 billion cubic meters to Sudan. The treaty gave Egypt the right to veto projects on the river, and the treaty between Egypt and Sudan in 1959 increased Egypt's portion to 55.5 billion cubic meters and Sudan's to 18.5 billion cubic meters. The rest 10 billion cubic meters water was sought to account for seepage and evaporation. Egypt demands that Ethiopia use the Blue Nile's water according to those agreements. But Ethiopia was never a party to any of them, and thus it considers itself not bound to them and free to construct its own projects on the river. Egypt, together with Sudan, has long tried to bring Ethiopia to the negotiating table and agreed to a binding agreement regulating the process of filling and operating the dam. But the talks ended in a deadlock repeatedly amid mounting fears of a military conflict. Even Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed answered Egypt's threats by saying, quote, "Some say things about the use of force. It should be underlined that no force could stop Ethiopia from building a dam. If there is a need to go to war, we could get millions ready. If some could fire a missile, others could use bombs. But that's not in the best interest of all of us." Seeing Ethiopia's determination to construct and operate the dam without any agreement with Egypt and Sudan, the Egyptian government tried hard to lobby the African Development Bank and the World Bank not to finance Ethiopia's mega dam project. But Ethiopians didn't give up. They gathered the money through crowdfunding. The Ethiopians in the country and abroad raised $4.5 billion for their $5.5 billion mega project. The rest $1 billion was owned by the Chinese Exim Bank. So having secured the amount of money it needed...
You heard that. The Chinese Exim Bank gave them $1 billion of the $5 billion, and the Ethiopians came up with their own money. The World Economic Forum people tried to stop them, and they couldn't. Go Ethiopia.
Ethiopia confidently proceeded with the construction of the dam. And finally, in 2020, in the absence of any agreement with Egypt and Sudan, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed announced that they are starting to feed the reservoir.
Now, if you look at previous... right there.
In the absence of any agreement with Egypt and Sudan, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed announced that they are starting to feed...
Right there. If you notice in the prior shot, all of this was filled with water. And it was draining out. That's a lot of water for that dam. That is a huge... I could see where they could be a prosperous country. And, wow, you know, this actually looks like... Hold on. This is not financial advice. But don't they say that the best place to put your money in hard times is in upcoming third world countries? Because it's real cheap to invest in them, and it's like startups. Well, that looks like a good place to invest. Because if they're fixing to give half their country power, man, the entrepreneurship that'll be going on there in that big old butt-ass country. And they get rain, unlike Egypt, and they can use 100% of their country. Egypt can only use 4%. Interesting. I see great prosperity here in Ethiopia.
Feed the reservoir. Of course, it freaked out Egypt and Sudan, and shortly after the announcement, Egypt appealed to the United Nations Security Council to intervene in the situation and described Ethiopia's actions as an imminent threat to the international peace and security. The UN Security Council called the sides to continue negotiations under the African Union, and they did so. But unfortunately, the talks ended in a stalemate again, and Ethiopia started the first phase of the filling of the dam's huge water reservoir. 2 years later, on February 20, 2022, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed inaugurated the dam after the second filling and said it was 84% complete, with 18.5 billion cubic meters of water in its reservoir. The inauguration also marked the generation of electricity from one of the 13 turbines in the dam for the first time, producing a capacity of 375 megawatts of energy. During the inauguration, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said that from that time on, there would be nothing that would stop Ethiopia. But he also said that, quote, "We want to export our pollution-free electricity to Europe through Sudan and Egypt. So the way forward is cooperation."
Pollution-free electricity. We want to export our pollution-free. That right there makes it worth more.
Among us.
Tell me that's not going to be a good place to invest in. They're going to get hundreds of millions of dollars in exported power, money for exporting power to invest in their own country.
Ethiopia doesn't want or intend to harm anyone else. To counteract Ethiopia, Egypt started deepening its ties with Sudan, including military cooperation and joint training. And according to Anadolu agency, Egypt is trying to support defined insurgency groups in Ethiopia to sabotage the process of filling the dam and its operation.
And that is why I pointed out on the map to you at the beginning of this video. I pointed out when he showed the map, I pointed out where in South Sudan they're having this tribal warfare issues. That is what Egypt is pushing for, because that is right beside, it's like 15 kilometers away from the GERD Dam, and Ethiopia wants to blow that sumbitch up. They gave him a deadline of this November. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but the world's a crazy place right now.
By igniting internal conflicts in the country. Despite all this strong opposition from Egypt and criticisms from some international organizations, Ethiopia says the dam will benefit every country in the region, including the two downstream countries, Sudan and Egypt. Apart from selling affordable electricity to its neighboring countries, Ethiopia promises it will prevent the disastrous floods in Sudan that cause devastation every year. Also, Ethiopia has very high annual rainfall, which in turn will help it keep water in its reservoir for a long time with much lower evaporation losses compared to Egypt's Aswan High Dam. Thanks to it, they will be able to provide Egypt and Sudan with water during dry years, and it will be extremely useful for them, for irrigation purposes especially. But Egypt and Sudan's concerns should also be taken into account while operating Ethiopia's megadam. The Nile River has been a critical lifeline that literally brought life to the desert since ancient times. Even without the dam, this lifeline is already running dry, and there are many reasons for that, such as climate change, poor maintenance, mismanagement, etc. And
Now that right there, yeah, climate change, sure, whatever. Mismanagement. Egypt and Sudan have been mismanaging their water because of tribal issues in Sudan and South Sudan. They elect people based on their tribal relations. They are very, very racist down there against each other. I don't give a fuck if you're white or black. Depends on what tribe you're in. It's a weird political system down there. Who is it? There's a country, Kenya, just had their very, very first president elected with, I think, 52% of the votes, and he actually didn't run off of tribalism. He ran off of the economics of the country and how it would benefit everyone. So right now, Kenya's got their first president that was elected not by tribal lines, but cross-border, cross-tribal, whatever. Anyhow, too long enough, or not enough people watched my reports to take this any longer. You guys have a nice night.